Hi guys, welcome back. So I'm going to do another movie review today. I've just finished uni, so over the next couple of weeks I'm going to be doing some videos. There's a couple of films I've been wanting to see, not just from last year, but I've been just wanting to catch up on just a couple of films that have kind of slipped my radar. One of which was Certified Copy by Abbas Kiarostami, but I'm also going to be doing a top 10 video from last year, so the 10 best films of last year. I've got a good idea of what they are. There are still a couple I want to see though, that's the only thing, so I'm just going to wait till I've seen everything I want to see before I do that video, but I'm definitely going to have that done within the next fortnight for sure. Now, Certified Copy is a film from 2010 by Abbas Kiarostami, and it's his first non-Persian film. It's perhaps in that way his most reflective film. Many of the themes that run throughout most of his films, many of these themes are present here, but in a slightly more removed and reflective way. It's a film I've never got round to. I don't really know why. I haven't really got a very good reason for it. I'm familiar with Kiarostami to a certain extent. I know most of his acclaimed Iranian films. I haven't seen every single film he's done, not by a long stretch. I think it's over 40 titles, including everything he's done. The films that I think about when I think of Kiarostami, and whenever there's a conversation going on about him, these are the ones I bring up. Yeah, the Coca trilogy from the late 80s into the early 1990s, and also Close Up from 1990, which is a kind of fictitious documentary about a guy that impersonates an Iranian director in the late 1980s. All four of those films are absolutely excellent. Whereas The Friend's House and Close Up being my favourite out of all of them. He's a remarkable director, and he has very recurrent themes that run throughout his films that are just as present in this film. Certified Copy is different from the films I've seen before, of course. This is his first film, and I believe his only film that he did outside of Iran, and the film actually combines a mixture of French, Italian and English that is used by both actors throughout the film. Kiarostami's influences stretch from kind of the neo-realist cinema of the post-war period in Italy, so Robert Rossellini's Journey to Italy is a big influence. Also the kind of modernist romanticism of Richard Linklater and his Before trilogy, notably the first two. Obviously the third one was made after this. It combines a lot of really interesting aspects of different directors that I think gives it extraordinary humanist credentials, and that's the thing I've loved about Kiarostami's filmography. He's a extremely humanist director, and the issues and themes that he deals with are eternal and consistent throughout his films. The film tells the story of two people, the first of which is James Miller, an art historian on a book tour in Italy, and of an unnamed character played by Juliette Binoche, who goes to see him at this book tour. Kiarostami is very ambiguous over the characters' relationship. This ambiguity not only continues throughout the whole film, but it actually becomes more convoluted, more confusing as the third act approaches. Things happen and the characters' kind of behaviour changes alongside it. It's very, very interesting. I haven't seen this kind of romantic ambiguity in a film in a very long time, but also quite confusing for some people expecting a more linear romantic story. So it's definitely going to be interesting before it actually pleases some audiences.
I'd have wanted them to have to be married and to be finding some resolution, but now I've heard these other arguments. I don't know, now I'm even more confused.
Kiarostami conceived the idea from an opera he directed about romantic games of deception and impersonation. William Schiller is absolutely perfect for the role. Of course, this was his first acting role. He'd actually be cast by Michael Haneke in Amour 2 years later. But this was his screen debut, and for such a big role, there are certain moments where it's clear that he's not a seasoned actor like Binoche, for example. But I think it's actually perfect casting because, again, this whole ambiguity between what is real, whether it's a performance, whether it's not, whether it's genuine, this is perfect for him because it adds to that ambiguity. His insincerity, his coldness, his distance, it really plays into the dynamic, and it worked perfectly. After his speech talking about the nature of art, reproduction and authenticity, and how exact replications of the original work can be considered just as valuable as the original itself. She leaves him a note asking to meet. The next morning he goes to her antique shop, and they begin their kind of one-day journey together. One of my favourite scenes of the film is in a scene that happens immediately after this, when they go on a pretty long protracted car journey in the countryside of Tuscany, and he discusses how the trees that pass them, how each one is different from the next, how they are the very embodiment of originality, of artistry. They are unique, they are authentic, and they are old. They have all the tenets of a piece of art. It was a really thought-provoking moment of the film, and again it kind of embodies the film's philosophical pondering concerning that of originality and that of replication. It was a really good scene, and again, in kind of a Linklater-like fashion, the camera's very passive. Kiarostami puts the camera at the front of the dashboard for the entire scene, and like in the scene in Before Midnight, when they're in the car, we just see these characters just looking forward as we see all their facial expressions, the awkwardness, everything is captured as they view the countryside before them. It's a very well constructed scene. Going back to what he says about the museums and how objects, when they're contextualized within the parameters of a museum, they're considered more valuable, they're considered greater. This is something that's interesting about how this reflects cinema itself, and how the cinematic image, how all images are replications of the image of which they took. And this also can be related to the cinematic image itself, and how cinema is a replication of reality. Almost like nothing is totally original. Everything is taken from something else, or captured from something else. But the trees they're passing in the car, they are completely original. And it was kind of interesting, this questioning of what we consider the authentic and valuable, and why we think this. It's a very interesting philosophical point. And as the film progresses, there's a kind of conflict between intimacy on the one hand, confusion on the other, and the ambiguity of their relationship kind of culminates in a scene towards the end of the second act, where they're inside an Italian cafe, and an older lady begins talking to Binoche's character as James leaves the cafe to make a phone call. And she has a very traditionalist view of gender roles. She kind of says that women must be accepting of a man's duty to fulfill his work. His work must come before everything, which I'm guessing for Kiarostami is his own reflection on his own world. And it's clear as this lady is talking, she has presumed, as the audience might, that they are in fact husband and wife. And from this point on, the film takes a really interesting turn, because the two actors then assume these roles. They begin to act as a husband and wife that have been married for supposedly 15 years. And this is a really interesting caveat in the film's romantic narrative, and certainly one that I wasn't expecting before I'd seen the film. During the film's first half, it is not clear whether the fleeting moments of intimacy and bondage that seem to be developing between the two characters is more like before sunrise and before sunset, and less like before midnight, as the two strangers seem to be developing a degree of bondage and intimacy, with James's coldness always preventing it from developing into a full-blown romance. In this sense, the film's relationship is a reflection of the film's philosophical pondering. The film's central thesis, embodied by the main character's book, this notion between what is real and what is actually a facade. And the relationship itself becomes this. By the end of the film, it is still not clear whether the relationship is real or whether it's not, whether they're just playing into the roles. It's a very thought-provoking film, and it's one that certainly demands repeated viewings, because there's a lot of ideas that are really crammed into the film, and Kiarostami is negotiating lots of ideas through the mise-en-scène, through the characters' dialogue, and I think this is what makes the film by far his best film. This film really married great emotional engagement with a deep philosophical insight that I thought was unparalleled among the rest of his filmography. So I honestly can't recommend this film enough. So it's a film I've just wanted to see for such a long time. I'm so glad I've finally seen it. I wanted it to be the perfect experience, so I really had the perfect mindset for it, and I think it's borderline perfect. I absolutely loved it. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you later.